The following program sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth, and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
So it's Friday, and we're going to be talking about money. And, most recent studies show that 2015 has been the most volatile year since 2008. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit and later in the program. I have a great guest. You want to hear what two guests. You want to hear what they have to say. It's kind of a historical moment that we passed this last week. Queen Elizabeth II passed the record of Queen Victoria. Queen Elizabeth II served as monarch for over 23,226 days. She's continuing to serve as Britain's longest-serving monarch. That's a long time. She was coronated in 1953. And it seems to play into this whole idea that we're living longer. We are living longer. While we talk about life expectancy, we really don't know what the lifespan of a human being is. That's how long we can live. Not how long we do live, but how long we can live. The oldest living woman that's been on record, oldest living person on record, actually lived in Arles in France, Jean Calment. She lived to be 122 years, 164 days old. Interesting story. Very interesting story. She turned 100 before she gave up smoking. But she didn't smoke a lot of packs of cigarettes a day. But it was when she turned 100 that she decided she needed to give up smoking. Interesting thing, she lived at a time that she knew Van Gogh. Her father, in fact, had a shop in Arles where Van Gogh was supplied with some of his painting, pencils and paints and easels and all the things that artists buy. And she described Van Gogh as being dirty, as being smelly, as being rough, as being gruff, and not a very nice person. Maybe you see some of that in his paintings. I mean, the violent brushstrokes. Tremendous paintings, tremendous to see. But she lived at that time. Very interesting story about her, because in France, one of the things that people do they didn't have Social Security, so at the time, but one of the things they do is a younger person will make a contract with an older person to buy their house. The older person gets to live there, the older couple gets to live there until both people in the couple or the single person actually dies. And then the payments stop and the house becomes the property of the younger person who bought the house. Now, there was an attorney that lived in Arles that wanted to buy her house. He was in his 50s and 60s at the time. He wanted to buy her house. She was in her 90s when they finally reached an agreement that they would buy her house. And so he began to make payments. Every month he made a payment. And she continued to live longer and longer. Actually, she outlived him. And he paid. His wife continued, his widow continued to make the payments until eventually the old lady actually died. But they paid almost 3 times the value of the house. Interesting story. But this whole idea of life expectancy and long living brings us to the question of health care, in my opinion. And that's what I really want to talk about today, because the oldest person didn't live in the United States. The life expectancy of people in the United States, we rate not very high. There are over 50 nations who have a longer life expectancy than we do in the United States. We're paying a tremendous amount for our healthcare system, almost twice as much as anyone else, sometimes 3 times as much as other countries pay, and yet they live longer than we do. That's part of the questions that were raised when we brought Obamacare. You know, that whole question I want to talk about. But first, there was another thing that happened this week or recently. Martin, I got to say his name right, Skelly? I think I said it right. Martin Skelly was a venture capitalist or a venture, somebody that was not a pharmacist, but he bought a company called Turin Pharmaceuticals. And they went out and they bought a drug. Now, this drug has been on the market for 62 years. That means it goes back to the 1950s when it was approved. And actually, in the 1950s, you didn't have an FDA that we have today. You didn't have the rigor that drugs had to go through. But it went all the way back to that time. And it treats a very small type of disease or a very small market, a very niche market, few patients. And it's a drug that was used for not pain relief, but for relief from an infection. People that have an immune compromised body where they're easily catch diseases, HIV, for example, some of those. Anyway, that was the area in which this drug served. A very small market. The drug sold pills for $7.50 before he bought the rights to this drug. And what did he do? He immediately raised the price to $750. Huge increase. I mean, that got everybody's attention. But it wasn't the only one. That was Daraprim. It was something that happened, became very visible, and became very noted when Hillary Clinton came out and said she would take action against companies that did this. But it's not the only one. Valiant of Canada took 2 heart drugs, and they acquired those, immediately raised the price. Horizon Pharmaceuticals took a pain relief drug and raised the price almost 600%. You know, if you look at what's happened at drug prices in the U.S. in the past couple of years, the prices have risen 127% versus 11% for the consumer price index. That's part of what's going on. You know, but as you look at the healthcare system, there's a lot of controversy over Obamacare. And for me, I think that what Daniel Patrick Moynihan had to say is really true. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but no one is entitled to their own set of facts. You know, it's become one of those things that the Republicans continue to pass and spend a lot of time passing bills to overturn Obamacare. In the debates now, the presidential candidates talk about repealing Obamacare as one of the first actions when they're in office. You know, it's something, when you have a look at what's really happened, it has had a positive impact. You know, when you look at what was happening with the healthcare system prior to the passage of Obamacare, prices in the healthcare system were rising at 6.3% per year. For all the talk back in 2010 and 2011 and 2012, for all the talk that was going on about regulation and taxes and the burdens those were putting on businesses and the burdens that were keeping people from hiring, the reality is when you got down to it and you asked people, what's the biggest concern you have? It wasn't regulation. It wasn't taxes. It was health care. If you're a business owner, you remember those times. If you remember, healthcare costs were increasing at 10, 15, 20% a year. Your premiums were increasing by that amount. That's what was going on at that time. And you remember when Obamacare was passed, most of the insurance companies did a significant increase in their premiums. It was after they passed, and the year went on, healthcare companies, insurance companies were held to the fact that they could only charge 15% more than what they paid out. What happened? You remember that? They had to give out rebates. They raised their premiums a whole bunch, but when it came down to it, what did they do? They gave back rebates. In 2010, the cost per capita for healthcare in the U.S. was a little over $8,000 per person. Today, it's $8,500. That's an increase of less than 2% a year. It used to be 6% a year. I did the calculation at one time and showed that if the healthcare costs continued to increase at the rate it was increasing prior to 2010, that by 2070, it would be 98% of our GDP. I mean, it was crazy. It was just too much. We're coming up to a break. Don't go away, because we've got more to say about this whole thing. And you want to hear my guest? We want to talk about volatility in the market. Don't go away. We've got a lot to come.
Stay tuned. About Money returns in a moment with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
You know, Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our clients' interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your seven-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
We're back with more About Money. For details on what you hear on today's show, visit adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Now, here again is Mike Adams.
So I've been talking about healthcare. You know, healthcare is a very significant portion of our country's GDP. We spent $3.8 trillion on healthcare last year. Actually, I think that's 2013. That's $8,508 per capita per person, per capita. That's very, very significant. When you look at that and compare it to the military budget, for example, it's 17% of GDP. Military spending on the budget is 4%. It's 4 times what we spend on military. And not only that, when you look at it, you would think that we would have the best healthcare system and the best results in the world. It's not true. While healthcare has grown over 10 times what it was in 1980, infant mortality is higher than any other industrialized nation. Infant mortality, we lose more babies than any other industrialized nation. Our life expectancy, we're 42nd. There's over 40 nations that live longer than we do, and they pay a whole lot less for health care than we do. And our life expectancy at birth is 50th. That means there's 49 other countries who are expected to live longer than the new babies being born today. You know, our expenditures have grown. There's something that needs to be done. I started by talking about Britain and the Queen, but in Britain they live longer than we do, and they have a healthcare system that they spend half of what we do. The same is true in France. The same is true in many industrialized countries. While our health expenditures have leveled out, they're still very, very significant. Our access is the best in the world. I mean, if you compare MRI machines in Seattle, we have, as of a couple of years ago, we had 19 in Seattle. In BC, they have 1. You know, in BC, if you want a knee replacement, you can wait for 3 or 6 months. Here, you can get in almost immediately. There's a price that we pay for that, but that doesn't carry through to the entire healthcare system. We're seeing some of the impact of Obamacare, and let's give credit where credit is due. It's actually made a difference. The estimates a couple of years ago was that it would save $140 billion in our healthcare costs. We're starting to see that. For the first few years, we're seeing a reduction in the increase of what we're spending on healthcare. Will we save $140 billion? Who knows? Will we start to see increases in healthcare go up like they have before? Who knows? But at least in the beginning, we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot more people insured. And some of those are healthy people that are going to help and contribute to the healthcare system, contribute dollars to the system, and contribute more than are being paid out. What we're seeing in many cases is a war of words, not a question of fact. It's something that it seems to me there's issues to be dealt with. Medicare is in big trouble. They need to deal with Medicare, but not by doing away with all of Obamacare. That's my opinion. That's what I think. Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but no one's entitled to their own set of facts. I believe that's true. I believe when you look at it in fact-wise, we have seen a change. But there's more things that need to be done. You know, the healthcare is a huge issue, a huge, broad thing, and it doesn't cover everything. And I think that's where my guests are today. Insurance doesn't cover what they do, but what they do is very significant. So I want to introduce Steve Wangan and Tom Mercer from IBD Treatment Center. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you, Mike.
So why don't we start, Steve, with your background, and we'll get to Tom's background right after that.
Well, I'm a physician, and we're co-founders of the IBS Treatment Center. And 10 years ago, when we established this clinic, it's basically a new specialty in medicine because this was a very underserved need.
Let's go back before you establish the clinic.
Yeah.
Let's go back and get background.
Yeah, well, I am a naturopathic doctor. I went to Bastyr University, graduated back in 1999. I went to Pacific Lutheran University before that, here in Tacoma, Washington. And so I've lived here for the past 20 plus years or so.
So why don't you tell us about Bastyr a little bit and their approach?
Well, Bastyr University trains naturopathic doctors, which are essentially, in all respects, like primary care physicians. We can prescribe medications. We can do anything that a general primary care physician can do. But we tend to not prescribe medications if we don't have to. And that's where things really start to diverge and change. My focus at the IBS Treatment Center is on trying to solve the cause of the problem and not just patch the problem with some kind of Band-Aid, essentially. And that's very different, of course.
Yeah. So we'll come to IBD. But Tom, we want to hear about your background.
I went to college at Pacific Lutheran University with Dr. Wangan. That's where we met far too many years ago to talk about. I studied business at the Foster School of Business, University of Washington, and we went into business together. My background, my mother is a doctor. My uncle's an emergency room doctor, recently retired. My cousin's an emergency room doctor. I've been around a lot of the business of medicine, and I saw how poorly it worked for a variety of problems. And when my wife had IBS, I took her to see Dr. Wangen, and he solved the problem. Where if you look at the statistics on IBS, it's considered an unsolvable problem with no known cause and no known cure. So it just really opened my eyes, and that's why I went into business with Dr. Wangen, because we know there's a huge community that needs to be served.
So let's talk about IBS. Tell us what IBS is, and tell us about traditional approaches, and tell us about your approach.
Right. Well, IBS is a really broad label. It literally stands for irritable bowel syndrome. And if you go to the doctor and you've got a digestive problem and you might have diarrhea or constipation or gas or bloating or abdominal pain, then if you have nothing else, if you don't have appendicitis and you don't have gallstones and you don't have a tumor, then you're essentially left with this label that says, well, your bowel irritates you, and you haven't learned a thing. So you went to the doctor, you had a complaint, and the doctor said, well, we'll give you this symbol, this syndrome that says, oh, you have an irritated bowel. And unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of treatments conventionally for that. They might give you pain medication or give you something to try to kind of speed things up if your bowel's moving too slow, or slow things down if your bowel's moving too fast. And that's very common because you can see those drugs just in the drugstore. You see the Imodiums and all the anti-diarrhea medications, and then all the constipation medications and the laxatives and all that. But it doesn't cure the problem, unfortunately. So where we come in is our goal is to resolve the problem so people don't need to be taking those kinds of things. And I myself had IBS. I'm a sufferer. It was 20 years ago. Unfortunately, I don't have that problem anymore. But that was one of the things that got me very interested in this field, is that I knew we needed more. We needed to be able to help people much better than we were helping them, because there are a lot of people who have IBS, and the statistics on it are incredible. We're talking 10% at minimum of the population. So we've got 30 million people or more easily who suffer from IBS. And yet essentially when they go to the doctor, that's the end of the road, is the diagnosis. And for us, that's the beginning of the road. And it's not so much labeling them with IBS, it's figuring out, well, why in fact do they suffer from this problem, and what can we do to solve that problem? And it's a fascinating field and area for us, because we get to see people from all over the country, literally, who will come to us for help, and they've been to many doctors, and they've been to gastroenterologists, and gastroenterologists are great specialists in their area, but IBS is not their area, really, and most people don't realize that. They don't recognize that the gastroenterologist is not actually the expert in IBS. They assume so, but the gastroenterologist is the expert in doing colonoscopies or doing an upper endoscopy and looking for different kinds of damage, but not necessarily actually solving problems that get lumped under IBS. And if there were a really easy, simple cure to tell you about, I would tell you, but our job basically is to do the detective work to figure out what really is underlying each patient's problem so that we can solve it.
So what you're saying is that traditional medicine has been treating symptoms, trying to alleviate the symptoms, but really not getting to the issue of what's causing IBS.
Well, exactly. And I think that a lot of people recognize that when they stop and think about it. They say, okay, well, I haven't been cured. I'm taking Imodium now to slow down things because I've got diarrhea, but I still have it if I don't take Imodium. Or I'm taking a laxative because I'm constipated, but why am I constipated? And these are issues that fall into this giant world of healthcare that's not being really very well addressed. And part of it is because there's so much profit to be made in certain aspects of healthcare that everything has gotten shoved into that small part of the healthcare world. And we can maybe get into that more if we have time.
We will. We're coming to a break, and so don't go away. You want to hear more of this. We've got more coming out soon.
About Money with Mike Adams will resume in a moment on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
So I'm here with Steve Wangen and Tom Mercer. We're talking about the IBD Treatment Center. So the impact of IBS. Let's talk about that.
Well, yeah, the financial impacts are amazing. It's the second most common reason people miss work, right after the common cold. So millions and millions of Americans are missing work frequently because they've got this problem that just keeps coming back and coming back. It costs the economy in the billions of dollars. That's from a study that was produced in 2005. So we're talking about, since then, it's probably much, much higher. People spend hundreds of dollars a month on over-the-counter remedies when they have IBS. And like Dr. Wangen mentioned earlier, the conservative estimate based on studies that have looked at the entire population in the United States are 10% of the population at any given time has IBS. It affects people's lives in their work, in their family life, in their social life. People go on permanent disability. And so the rest of us are having to pay to keep them on Social Security disability for the rest of their lives when they have these kinds of problems. And the challenge is that the conventional or standard approach to IBS is we rule out stuff that's going to kill you, like colon cancer and bowel obstruction. Once we've ruled those out, you've got IBS that's got no known cause, so there's no known cure, and we'll try and treat you with some antidepressants or some antispasmodic medications, things like that. But that's the standard approach. The standard approach is, of course, accepted by the insurance company. So if the doctor wants to get paid, he better follow the standard approach.
And of course, it means that it doesn't go away. It keeps coming back again and again.
Which is something that you would expect the insurance companies to be looking for solutions, but that's not really the goal. The goal in the insurance company is to make sure that they collect enough premiums to cover the claims. So as long as they can collect enough premium to cover the claim, there's not a lot of incentive for them to focus on effectiveness in treatment. If the treatment has been done for a long, long time, it's accepted by everybody, then great, just keep doing that. And as long as they can plan for the expense, which they can, IBS patients are very costly, but they are also very predictable. So there's not a lot of incentive to change that system as it is.
So let's talk about the treatment center. What do you do at the treatment center? Because you're talking about not just treating symptoms, you're talking about curing IBS.
Right. Well, absolutely. That's our number one goal when we see patients, and it often surprises them because that's not something they've been exposed to. So they've been to doctors, and often they come to us and are just at the end of their rope. Literally, they will tell us that we're their last hope because they've been told that there's nothing else that can be done and that there's no reason that they can be helped. And that's just absolutely not true when your fundamental goal is to solve the problem. If that's not your goal, which unfortunately in medicine that's generally not the goal, and it's a byproduct of the way the medical system is set up, is that the reason things are so expensive is one of the reasons is that we have this incredibly good acute care system. So if you have an emergency or you need a life-saving event, this is probably the country you want to be in. That's where all that money's going to. And all the technology and everything that we're pouring into the medical system is all about doing some really cool stuff, but the cool stuff doesn't apply to most of us. You know, solving IBS is not really cool. It's not, it's a methodical thing. It takes some time, and it takes really, we spend a lot of time with patients, and we do investigative work to really sort it out. It's not something we just can tell them pop a pill and everything's fine. So when we see a patient, and these are the kind of people who fall into a majority of problems in healthcare are really these chronic issues like IBS. They're 80% of medicine is really about treating chronic care, but the profit's all in that 20%. So the chronic care stuff is just treated with easy, simple, hey, we don't have a procedure, here's a pill, here's a pill, here's a pill. And unless people demand something more, that's where they end up. So what we have to do is take this complex problem, because IBS really is not one thing. It's really hundreds of different things, not just symptoms, but hundreds of different causes, all kinds of triggers. That's why people have a hard time trying to go on the internet and Google the solution to IBS, because you're going to find a solution, but you're going to find lots of solutions.
Yeah.
And they're going to find them. And there are lots of things that have potential value. There's also a lot of nonsense on the internet when it comes to IBS, or probably anything else. But there are things that have potential value, but it's knowing when to apply those things in each patient. And that takes time, because there literally are hundreds and hundreds of different issues that are involved in why people's digestion goes sideways on them. And what we have to do is spend the time with these patients to start to narrow that down, because they've heard about things, they've heard about supplements, and they've heard about probiotics maybe, and they've heard about gluten intolerance, and they've heard just, and the list goes on, and there are all these special diets, and there are all kinds of special treatments. And really, all of those things have some truth to them. They actually do. All these things are valuable because there's a lot going on in that digestive tract. There's this complex ecosystem of all kinds of stuff that's happening in that environment, and people may have heard about the microbiome, which is a fascinating area. There's the immune system. Most of your immune system's in your digestive tract. About 80% of your immune system is in there, because that's what it needs to do, is protect you from things. Mm-hmm. Well, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong, though, with that ecosystem and with the immune system in there. And to try to turn this long story into something short is that we have to just work our way through very methodically all these different issues until we can get it narrowed down to something really relevant for that patient that's in front of us. And once we can do that, we can give them a treatment plan that has a way higher chance of being successful than just randomly throwing one of these ideas at them that they've heard about on the internet. Or that their doctor just said, well, we're just going to treat everybody with IBS this way. Well, if you actually specialize in the area like we do, and you spend the time with the patients to sort these things out, you could come up with solutions that really work for them long term, and aren't Band-Aids that really, where they don't have IBS anymore. That's our goal, is our patients, we don't want them to have IBS. It's kind of a bad business model, but that's what we want to do.
But it's also a good business model, because if you ended up with people paying a lot of money and then not getting cured, that information would really move around very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a model that requires us to be successful. So it's not the business model for the sloppy practitioner. It's the business model for the dedicated practitioner, because we see patients a few times over a few months. The doctors figure out what's going on and help them get better, and then they go on and live their life. So we have a very short period of time. It's not like a general medical practice where you get the family and then you see them every year for their annual physical, and whenever they have a cold or a flu, they're coming in. So you only need 200 or so families to be on your list, and you can have a viable business. We're solving a very specific problem, and once we've solved it, the patient doesn't need us anymore. The good side of that is those people, even though it's an incredibly embarrassing problem for a lot of people, they go out in the world and quietly, sometimes we've had patients tell us about talking to their coworkers in the bathroom stalls. I noticed that you're in here a lot. You might want to go to the IBS treatment center. They could really help you. I had a problem and I got help there. And so it works really well on that side of things. You mentioned earlier about insurance, and most of our patients do get reimbursed by their insurance company. But in order for us to be as successful as possible, we had to break free of the working for the insurance company model. Most doctors do not work for their patient. They work for the insurance company. That's who pays them. They work for a whole group of insurance companies. And beyond that, they're even more further removed. They work for the doctor group that works for the insurance company. So it's really hard for them to have their incentives aligned well with their patients' goals. They have the company's procedures and they have the insurance company policies. That's what drives their decision making for the most part. We had to get rid of that because we found that each different insurance company had a different approach to how they were going to reimburse for different things that we needed to do for a lot of patients. So there's some testing that's really important for a majority of our patients, and some insurance companies will pay for it. Other ones, if you argue enough, they'll pay for it. Others won't pay for it at all. And we need to do that for the patient. So we make it really clear to the patient, here's what we're offering to you, and here's what it costs. No mystery bill 6 months later after the denial comes from your insurance company. This is what it costs. And then you send that off to your insurance company, and if everything goes well, you get reimbursed, and most of our patients do.
And you have a tremendous success rate. That's what
we
that's
really excel at. No provider in the world can match the success rate that we have at the IBS Treatment Center with IBS.
So if someone wants to contact you, how would they do that?
They can go to our website, ibstreatmentcenter.com, like ibstreatmentcenter.com, or they can give us a call at 206-264-1111.
Say that again.
206-264-1111.
It's great. Tremendous success rate, tremendous cure for the healthcare problems, and they do get a cure. It's not just treating symptoms. We're coming to a commercial break. Don't go away. I've got more things to talk about and volatility after this break. Be right back.
More About Money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our client's interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your 7-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
About Money continues. Remember the website adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I do want, before I get into talking about volatility, I want to remind you again, B47 Studios is offering a 15% discount if you would like to have and employ them to do some of your publicity and advertising work. They have a great group of people. They have great performance. They will offer a 15% discount, and all you have to do is mention you heard it on About Money, Adams Financial Concepts. You just let them know you heard about this, And that offer is good through the end of this month. So do call. It's well worth it. So 2015 is the most volatile month or most volatile year since 2008. We're not even finished with 2015, and we already have that record. You know, that's one of those things we've come in the last 5 years. We hit a low in March of 2009, and in the last 5.5, almost 6 years, we have had a tremendous run without a correction. This year, we're starting to see that volatility. And the question is, what do you do? Well, you know, there's a new movie out called Everest. It's based on John Krakauer's book, Into Thin Air. And reading that book, he said it's not one thing that goes wrong, not one big thing that goes wrong, but it's usually 10 small things. And I believe the same thing is true of underperformance in the markets. I believe that it's a combination of smaller things that contributes to people not achieving what the market achieves. You know, Charles, there's been a number of studies that have shown very few money managers actually beat the market. FAMA's most recent study shows that only 3% of money managers actually do as well as the market when you consider their fees. Charles Ellis wrote a book called, my mind, it slips away. Charles Ellis, his book. Man, that's terrible to think about that. And I'll remember as we go along, but his whole idea is most people don't do as well as the market. So the idea for the investor is to lower expectations. Winning the loser's game. That was the name of the book, Charles Ellis. Very classic book, written in the 1990s, but validated in the 2000s. Winning the loser's game. The idea is professional money managers, most of them don't do well over the longer term. So investors, if they want to feel good, have to lower their expectations. I don't believe that's true. I believe that there's reasons for underperformance. Some is too great a diversification. Tom Howard at the University of Denver has shown that money managers, if they picked just 10 stocks for their funds, would do much better than they do by having 100 or 300. Having 30 conviction stocks would do better than having 100. The second issue is statistical versus tactical. You just heard an advertisement coming into this program called New Venture on Wall Street. They're talking about a trading platform, trading in and out. John Bogle said it. He is the guy that started Vanguard funds. And what he had to say is, I have never known anyone, nor have I known anyone who knew anyone who over a long period of time traded and beat the market. It's being invested over the long term. It's a buy and hold kind of strategy. That is a second reason people move and trade around. And they trade not just stocks, but they'll move in and out of mutual funds as well. And it's not just the clients, not just the investors who do it. Financial advisors also have a tendency. You know, you hear financial advisors sit down and say, we're going to sit down on the same side of the table and evaluate money managers, or we're going to evaluate mutual fund managers. They sit down, and the idea is to evaluate performance. But how do you really evaluate performance? R.W. Baird did a study in which they found that over a period of 10 years, there's a small segment of money managers, of mutual fund managers, that actually outperform the market, averaging over 1% a year per year. But 100% of those fund managers underperformed at least 1 year. 85% underperformed 3 years. 25% underperformed by at least 5% for 3 years. So when you're sitting down and you're looking at how your account is doing, how your money manager is doing, how your mutual fund manager is doing, when you look at the underperformance, they didn't do as well as the market. The market is up, I'm not up as much. How do you evaluate and say, that's a money manager who has done better than the market over the long term, and I'll rely on what he does? Switching leads people to move from one fund to another. Dalbar does a study, and they've looked at this over a period of 30 years and looked at the average mutual fund investor. The average mutual fund investor who started 30 years ago with $100,000, it has close to $300,000 now, 270 in that neighborhood. But had they just done as well as the market, they would have over $1 million going through the 2008-2009 time period. But they would have well over $1 million, which means they left $700,000 of lost opportunity. Starting with $100,000, they could have made an additional $700,000. They made $300,000. That's how do you evaluate? You can talk to a financial advisor. Are they really on top of what's going on? For my clients, they get to talk to me, and I do the money management. I set the record, and I can explain what I'm doing. And those times in which I underperform, I can talk about why we're underperforming and talk about those times in which we're overperforming and set the expectations. It's a time with the volatility in the market. People have this feeling, if I can just get out now, I will save myself from those down days. Strange thing happened today. Not a strange thing, but one thing that was key that happened today, it was a reversal day. The market started down and then finished up. That's significant because it means people looked at the labor market. They thought the market was going to go down, the economy was going to go down, but you had a lot of people rush in and buy at the last time. Generally, reversal days signal a change in the market. Are we seeing the end of this correction? Maybe. Who knows for sure? It'll be 3 months before we know for sure. By that time, either we'll have gone down further or we'll be on our way. It takes 3 months. We'll evaluate it 3 months from now to see if today was a reversal day and today was the end of the correction. But join me next week. We've got more to talk about. We'll talk about this in 3 months to see if today was a reversal day. Have a great weekend, and I'll be back next Friday.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again next Friday afternoon at 3 for more About Money with Mike Adams, here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The following program sponsored by